So welcome to the Ultra Running Sam podcast. So just a quick word about our sponsors going forward. Obviously, we're sponsored, have been for a long time by Goku Projects, the trail running caps. Go check them out. Also, we're sponsored by Phoenix, however you pronounce it. Choose your way to pronounce it. We're sponsored by those head torches, so discount codes are around. And also we are proudly sponsored by Home Trails. So obviously you'll know that Home Trails is the series on YouTube for where I go and interview trail runners in their home environments and on the trails, and sit down interview out on the trails. But we're also turning it into a bit of a brand. So going forward, you're going to be hearing more about Home Trails. So we'll be organising social runs in and around the Midlands and the Peak District specifically, possibly some merchandise coming out, some hats and some t-shirts and stuff, so keep your eyes peeled for that. Okay, duties are done, on with the show. Okay, we are recording. So welcome to the Ultra Running Sam podcast, Max King.
Thanks. Yeah, good to be on. So
brilliant. Thanks for coming on. It's so we were just saying before recording that time zones, so it's like the tea time here, so 5 p.m. and it's 9 a.m. and we were just talking about the woes of being a parent with two teenage kids.
Yep, in the thick of it with teenagers, and I've got one going into 6th grade and one going into high school in 9th grade. So big changes for both of them and me as well. So
how does just while we're on that subject, then how does because you're an international runner, aren't you? Obviously, how do you sort of juggle sort of family life and your sort of responsibilities with racing and things?
yeah, I mean, like, as far as that goes, like I'm not gone a whole lot. I do some international racing throughout the year, and I like to race, so I race a lot for kind of like a typical runner, but I train and work from home. And so I'm here most of the time, kind of working with family and stuff. My wife's awesome, and she, kind of supports my habits, if you will, and kind of allows me to do what I want to do. And kind of understands that I need to get away sometimes in order to be happy and to like feel like I'm like doing something. And so she's happy to let me go. It's nice to kind of get away from the family sometimes, as you probably well know. But I always miss them when I'm gone. Like the Dragon's back and stuff, which was like a whole like almost 2 weeks away.
Yeah.
And you like I always like I look at other athletes out there, like the big mountain athletes and stuff, who are doing these huge like Himalayan objectives and stuff. I'm like, you're gone for months at a time. And so like I feel like there's a balance there that can be struck, and there's a lot of people who like would feel probably hesitant to be away from home for like a week or two at a time. And I look at it as like, yeah, I'm away from my kids and stuff, but I'm also like having these big experiences that I can then like show them what's possible in life, and so they can see what I'm doing, and kind of just see a different perspective on the world, basically, as far as like there's different things for everybody. And so some people are like very at home, and are there all the time. I'm not one of those. I could be traveling, almost 100% of the time. And so I kind of get a little antsy when I'm home too long. And I'm like, I gotta go. And so that'll be like a weekend or a night away, just kind of out adventuring in the woods, which is totally fine, and kind of like satiates that a little bit. But I mean, the big trips like this kind of almost allow me to like get all of that out of my system for a little while and come back and like just kind of dive into home life and not feel like I have to get back out there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it is what it is, and I just like to travel, and they see a different perspective on how you can do things in life. So
Mhm. Yeah, it's true, and it's good for the I call it when I go away for any more than like a week or something. I call it daddy appreciation time because they realize everything that I do for them on a daily basis. So when I come home with it, they appreciate it. So yeah, it's good to be home, but also good to you got to get away sometimes.
You do.
So obviously, we've got you on to talk about the Dragon's Back. But for people that are sort of unfamiliar with your sort of background, I normally start the podcast with the superhero question. So this is, if you've not heard the podcast before, um, if you're an ultra running superhero, all superheroes have an origin story. So how they became who they became, the sort of backstory that often the prequels are made about. So Max King, what is your sort of origin story then for people that don't know your background and are just sort of tuning in because they want to hear about the Dragon's Back? Where have you come from? Obviously, you're from the US and you've come over to do a very British race. How did you sort of begin your journey in running?
Well, I mean, with that, I think you kind of have to start with what kind of superhero are you and what's your superpower? And it was really funny because when I was running with Gabe Joyce during Dragons Back this week, he's like, "Hey, my superpower is that I can recover fast." And I'm like, that's really funny because I that's what I feel like mine is as well. And so he and I were running together throughout the week, and he kind of like gradually caught up to us, me and Simon, and we were all kind of running together. And Gabe had a last couple of days that were really good, and I could see like he recovered really well, right? Well, that's kind of like my superpower too, is like the recovery. And so I always feel like I'm like Wolverine out there, right? That's my superhero. And the recovery part of it is like or they're like the resilience, is like my superpower. And so that comes from like my history of just like always kind of taking everything on, especially like the really weird things, like
Mm.
head on and just like hitting it really hard. So give you an example, like when I was a kid, I grew up just running through the woods, and I feel like that kind of sets you up for like just falling down all the time, just getting yourself back up and just running through, whatever life throws at you. And so the resilience comes from that like strength side of stuff and just being able to run through things that most other like runners wouldn't be able to, right? With that kind of track and the road background, which is what I have. But I also have this other side to me that's like almost like coming from the obstacle racing side of like that resilience and having that strength and stuff. And so when I was in college, I kind of found this out of like we had a race called the DHC, which was the Dining Hall Classic, and it was a race that it was about a 3 mile race with 6 meals in it. So we had these all you could eat dining halls on campus, and you'd go to each dining hall and eat a meal. So an entree, a dessert, and a drink. And what I found out was like because it's a race and because it's so like out in left field, like for whatever reason, I honed in on this and like I could get myself to this next level of competitiveness during these types of races. And so I just excelled at things were like super weird. So that race, like we do a race called Cross Canyon, which was like you'd stand on one edge of the canyon and look across, and the other side of the canyon, it was no trail, you bushwhacking through a river. And I would just crush everybody on the cross country team. And it's just because this idea that you can just like run through anything kind of has always like been my mantra, and part of like who I am. And it's kind of carried over into like 100K World Championships, into obstacle racing. When I was doing obstacle racing, it's like running through walls instead of like trying to get over them as efficiently as possible, things like that. So that's like a long origin story right there, but that's what it
Right,
is. The
right.
resilience piece.
Yeah, yeah. So I'd obviously, some of the sort of English, British listeners who sort of might not be familiar with your early days in running. So I know you as an ultra runner, as a trail runner, but obviously you had a big road running background. What sort of background did you have leading into trail running then? It's like sort of before you found trail and ultra in road running.
Yeah, I mean, I had like the typical upbringing of running track and cross country in high school and college. And then after that, I kind of got into road running. The track side of things, I was always running steeplechase. Cross country was my favorite discipline, still is. And so I did that for a long time, made a couple of world teams in cross country, and then, had some success at road running as far as like being on the US circuit, being up there in the pro ranks and stuff. And then, kind of gradually, like I'd always kind of run trails, but I'd kind of like wanted to get more into trails as things went on, but I was kind of waiting for that scene to become more competitive, which it finally kind of did in about 2008 to 2010. And so I kind of jumped over to trails a little bit more and spent probably 4 years in there, kind of doing both, like focusing on trails, but also like going back to the road and the track. And so I made the Olympic trials 4 times between the steeplechase and track and the marathon. And then kind of went full trail running kind of around that 2000, I don't know, 14 time-ish. So yeah. And then kind of more of a trail runner ever since, and always kind of still dabble in the roads a little bit here and there when it's a good place to get some speed back into, like inject some speed back into your training and stuff.
Yeah, that's interesting. So do you feel like that sort of background in road running and track running is sort of giving you a good basis to sort of bring speed into ultra running then?
I do. I don't think I could have done what I did in trail running without that high performance track and road base that I got from that. It's like whenever I talk to anybody who's going into trail running, I always kind of like encourage them to do like the high performance like track and road running, like whether it's like through a coach and doing that in particular, or just putting that into your training on a regular basis. Like I think it's really important to develop that kind of speed, power, and efficiency that you get from those sports that you don't necessarily get from trail running. And I know people have done it totally different and just done trail running and have excelled really, really well. But for me, that wouldn't have been an option. And I'm glad I went through all of that to get to where I am today.
And the speed work keeps things. It's nice to feel fast, isn't it? When you've been
Yeah.
doing trail running and doing ultras, and you're focusing on really long stuff. I know I've fallen into that trap at times during the times that I've been running, and when I've been focusing on doing really long races, sometimes you neglect a bit of speed because you're concentrating on like big long days in the hills and stuff. But when you start, it's almost like you miss that speed work when you haven't done it, and then when you go back to it, it's hard. It's always hard into speed work. But the benefit of it is that you just feel faster, don't you? You feel fitter.
Yeah, and not only faster and fitter, but like more efficient. Like I notice like when I come off of like a big trail running block, or I'm like running easy for a long time and I hop on the track, like I feel like a gangly giraffe out there. Like because I can't, like my body isn't coordinated to run fast. And so it takes me a few track sessions to really feel like I get back into that efficiency that track kind of gives you. And so it definitely like has its advantages to it and stuff, and along with like just feeling fast and running fast and stuff, and increasing your fitness that way, it's super important. But just that efficiency too.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. So Dragon's back then. So first question is why? Why come all the way? Why they
I
come
got
all the way to Blighty to do a very, very English multi-day race that is
what?
renowned for being super tough, obviously.
Yeah,
Why?
it's funny. I got that question a lot last week of like, why are you here? How did you find out about Dragon's Back? And I can't put a finger on exactly like when I learned about Dragon's Back, but I've known about it for quite a while. I've done some of the Ora events, other races like Glencoe Skyline, Ring of Stjal, and I'm pretty sure I learned about it because of that. And I'm like I've done Trans Rockies, which is a stage race over here in the States. It's 6 days, about 20 miles on average per day, but at high elevation. And I'm like, I really love that format of stage racing, and I'd love to do more of them. And I need to find like ones that are competitive and things like that. And so when that popped up on my radar a few years ago, I'm like, okay, I got to remember that. It's on the bucket list. Like that looks really cool. I don't think I realized like how long it really was, because then last year came across my radar last winter. I'm like, oh, this is the year. I'm going to look into it, sign up for it. And so I did. And I started looking at it. I'm like, oh God, it's 40 miles a day for 6 days. Oh, that's really long. And so, like, you know, I've been thinking about this like last week, since last winter, since I signed up, and just like honestly, like really excited for it. Really looking forward to coming over there and having that experience, that pure like Welsh or UK like fell running experience, right? And so obviously, put time into learning about the route and everything else like that. I knew like kind of what to expect in terms of the footing from Glencoe and things like that too. So that wasn't totally a surprise. The 40 miles a day was terrifying me leading up to the race. I've never run that far in a week. I've never run that far day after day for 6 days. I'm like, I don't know if I can do that, but we're gonna go in and find out. So
Yeah, so that was sort of going to be my next question is like the sort of logistics wise, knowing about a race and then doing a race is different, isn't it? So normally, and I know that people spend a lot of time recceing the Dragon's Back because it is renowned for being a tough race. So people feel like they have to go do the sections that that people worry about, like Cribgoch and all of that. But
yeah.
how did you sort of balance that then? So I know you've had experience with the terrain by running over here in Britain, which would be a surprise to someone from the US that had never been on that terrain before, but you have. So how did you sort of balance going into it? Did you have recce days? Did you just look at the route?
I recce'd the first 2 miles of the course and I knew those really well. So I was totally set. I was fine. I knew exactly. No, I had no, I mean, I literally like, I got into Conwy like the Thursday before the race, I think it was. And yeah, I got to run the first 2 miles of the course over those next couple of days before the race. But yeah, no, I had no idea what the course was like going in. Obviously I saw the photos. I was trying to look at the maps. The maps don't mean anything to you unless you're on the ground and you're like, oh, this is what this looks like. But I had the photos. I knew there was some technical running. I had no idea that it was very similar in terms of like the technicality and the exposure to like Glencoe Skyline. But it was nice having done Glencoe, knowing that those types of things can be in some of Shane's races. Over here, we would never get something like that in a race course. That's just not allowed. We'd never have that amount of exposure. And I love that stuff. I'm totally fine with it. I love it. Racing over it is yeah, it's just super interesting and a lot of fun. And so it doesn't bother me, but like at the same time, like you just kind of have to take it as it comes when you don't get those days to recce the course and know where you're going. The first day, like the morning, pouring rain, clouds were low, had no idea where we were going. We were just running in the fog, and I'm kind of following Simon and a couple of other guys for most of the first half of the day. But we get to the first like technical climb where we're gonna like ridge scramble a bit, and I get away from Simon going up the hill, and I get up to the top, and I'm looking at my GPS on my watch, and I'm like, man, I can't tell exactly where we're supposed to go because I can't see anything. And I'm just kind of following. I get right on the GPS line and follow it, and I kind of drop over the other side, and there's a trail down there. I'm like, okay, there's a trail. So I go like 10 feet down the trail, and then it points me back up to where I just kind of came from, up a different gully. So I'm like, oh, okay, I'll follow that up. And then I'm up at the top, coming up, climbing up this little gully, like a full on scramble with my hands. And I see Simon pop his head over and he says, hey, what are you doing down there? I'm like, I don't know. And so it's like, I lost a couple minutes doing that a few times that day because I'd get away from Simon and then he knew exactly where he was going. And so he'd like pop out in front of me after I just dropped him, a few minutes before that. I'm like, shoot. But then by the time the last half of the day, first day rolled around, it kind of cleared. We were going up Cribgoch and then around Snowdon. I could see where we were going, and so I finally got away from Simon, and that's how I got those couple of minutes on that first day. And man, that terrain up there was fantastic. I mean, it was like once that cleared to see what we were running through was, man, that was fantastic. It was amazing. So it was super cool.
It is beautiful, that route, but I've been up Cribgot, quite a few times, and sometimes it's probably better if you go up there when it is a bit cloudy, because something you can't see that drop off side
Yeah,
area.
yeah, no, for sure. Well, and like it had rained all morning, right? So the rock is pretty slick still. It wasn't dry at all, and so I was just trying to like hang on for dear life and make sure that I was making good moves and keep my
Yeah,
feet on the rocks, but also like have good handholds before I started moving my feet across that and stuff. Because that exposure up there, it's real. And
yeah, yeah.
I was thinking about like if you're not from around there and haven't recce'd that, like, but you're not used to that sort of stuff in a race, like how like when you get up there, like I don't know how some of those people do it, honestly. Like some
Some people freeze when they go up there, don't
yeah,
they? That's a lot of experienced hikers have it on their like bucket list of things to go and do, and they go up there, and people have been, it's renowned for people getting on that ridge and just freezing and not being able to go any further. So,
I could
so
see
that
that as being a crux point of that race for a lot of people who kind of come from other areas that don't get to see exactly what they're going to be running over for sure.
so yeah. Do you think that more sort of international runners should come and try British races? Because I know we're obviously, as far as ultra running goes around the world, there's so many races that are sort of viewed as iconic. But I'm so glad that someone has come over to sort of experience these very British races, and I think it's something that should happen more. Do you think this is something that more US runners should come over and try these very British races?
Absolutely. I mean, so I said this at the end of the race, but the British fell running culture is probably my one of my or my favorite racing culture in the world because it's so low key, laid back, but also at the same time like very competitive. Like you guys, like the guys who are fell racing in the UK are really serious. They're very good at what they do, but you roll up into a farmer's field and the farmer lays down a chalk line in the field and then he says go. And it's like you go from that start line up to the top of that mountain and then you just come back down. And it's like so straightforward and it's like the most basic type of racing like on foot that you could have, and I love that aspect of it. And so I love the fell running culture, and a lot of this comes from Feet in the Clouds, the book, which is
Yeah,
one of the
yeah,
greatest running books ever written. And like it's just, I love that culture. I love the low key, like very competitive aspect of it, which you don't get in a lot of other things. And U.S. ultra running is very similar in terms of like the smaller races and stuff like that. And don't get me wrong, the big races are great. They definitely have a place, and it gets everybody excited to be there and like the atmosphere and stuff. But for me, I just prefer that kind of lower key vibe to it. And I love the UK fell running culture, and I highly recommend it to anybody that's interested in running in the UK. Like go over there, whether it's like the Dragon's Back, which is full on commitment, or just go over for like a vacation and find a fell race and run like one of the local fell races because they're fantastic and they're super low key and a ton of fun. So
yeah, yeah. So it, trying to find something comparable to that, I suppose, in the US. I mean, can you compare sort of people rolling up into a field and paying, £5 or a fiver to go in and do a race that, is only probably like a few miles long, sort of and straight up a mountain, straight back down again. And then you have a cup of tea and a piece of cake afterwards. It's something that's very British about
yeah,
it, isn't
yeah,
it?
yeah.
And it's not that book that Feet in the Clouds. That is a great read for anybody, and yeah, like you say, recommend that for anyone sort of wanted to know the history of fell running. It's great because when you realise that fell running probably began because of some drunk people having a bet over who could run to the top of the hill like
But those
first.
those are the best races. That's exactly how like I run a race every year in Alaska called Mount Marathon, and it has a
Yes,
very
yeah,
similar feel to it. It's like it was a bar bet 100 years ago, and they're
yeah.
like, "Can you run to the top of Mount Marathon and back in an hour?" And and it's stuck, and ever since it's been a race, and it's like the most important race in Alaska. And I really like that atmosphere and that culture. So it's cool. I mean, the best races, that's how they start.
It's Mountain Marathon. That's that the one where you have to run with no shirt on.
Yeah, yeah, it's not mandatory, but it's advisable to fit in with the Alaskans.
I saw the pictures from this year of
Yeah.
people running with no shirts on.
Yeah, it's kind of like the first year I showed up there. Yeah, I always run with a singlet on or whatever when I'm racing. I'm like, nope, no singlet this year, going shirtless because that's what all the Alaskans do. I just trying to fit in. So that's what I did.
That is something that we Brits wouldn't do. That's not very British to
Yeah.
it's very American. um, just thinking about the route then. Obviously, for people that sort of don't know the route, basically you just draw a line down the middle of Wales, going over all the mountain ranges, and it's 200. What was it? 230, 236 days, 236 miles,
Yeah, about that. So I got close to 240 miles.
58. Is it 58,000 feet climbing?
Something.
58.
Yeah, roughly averaged out to about 10K a day. So there was, yeah, it's between 55 and 60,000.
Decent. Yeah. What was your sort of favorite sort of section on the race then?
Um, what was I think really cool about this race is that it had a little bit of everything, and so you couldn't just be like a really good technical runner. You couldn't be just a good like gravel road runner or road runner. It's like you kind of had to be an all-around runner to get through this thing, which is what I appreciated about it. I think my favorite part probably was that, that ridge around Snowdon, just because of the views and the technicality, and that was kind of the maybe the most interesting part of the race. But honestly, like running through the fans in southern Wales, like was absolutely incredible as well. The morning started out very similar, being really foggy and I couldn't see a thing. But then it kind of opened up. And so by the time we got to Penny Fan, like you could see that whole ridge all the way around that we were running on. And that was super cool. Really good views, really, really pretty. So that was neat. And one of my favorite parts of that too, we ran by some like really pretty waterfalls and creeks and rivers all through the course of the week. So, I mean, the whole the whole thing was pretty interesting. I mean, obviously, I don't know. The least interesting part is kind of like when you're getting off of the mountains and running down a road into camp. But even some of those days, like, are really nice. I mean, you're running through the Wales countryside and stuff, and it's just really pretty. So, um, there was definitely no like bad part of that course. And I really appreciated that what they've done, like Shane and the team have done, is um, they have done an excellent job at figuring out that course so that it kind of rolls in a very logical way, to where like on day 5 what happened was like I was terrified after day 4. I had a really rough day 4. We ran down like I think we had 10K of road at the end of that day. My knees hurt, everything was starting to hurt. I had a rough day. I was kind of terrified going into day 5, like, is this going to happen again? Am I going to feel really bad all day? But the first half of day 5 is very runnable roads. Lots of kind of just like rolling roads, dirt roads, gravel roads, very runnable, right? Then you get to the fans, and it's like by the time you get to the fans halfway through, you're kind of done running that day. You're like, I'm tired of running. Like, I just want to hike. And you get to hike because you get to hike up and then run down the fans that are nice and soft, grassy. And so it kind of rolls and works really, really well. And then day 6, sure, like it's terrifying that you got to run another 40 miles, but it's pretty manageable. You get a couple of hills in there where you get to kind of take a break and hike up over the grassy hills and then run to the next one, and then kind of run into Cardiff. And it's like by the time you get there, you're just so excited to be kind of finishing up the week that you're just like rolling along. And it worked really well. Like the course runs very, very well. And I appreciated that how how they built that, how they organized that course, and just how it kind of all rolls together very well.
Yeah. How do you feel about that sort of that the that sort of layout of running a set amount of time every day? Because it's obviously different. There's other um big trail races, multi-day races where you sort of the clock starts and it doesn't stop until you finished. But how do you sort of quantify knowing that how do you sort of think about how you plan in your day when you wake up and you know that you've got a set amount of time? Are you thinking you want to get it done as quickly as possible, or and obviously you're at the front and you wanting to win? How do you sort of compose yourself at the start of the day, knowing what's coming with that sort of layout of the day?
I mean, part of it is just kind of accepting what you've got to do for the day, right? Like, you're going to be out there for, in my case, like 7 to 9 hours, right? And so you're just kind of like planning your day out. Like, I had since I'd never recce'd it, been there, like I had no idea like what I was actually going to be running through. Even on the last day, I was looking at the map the night before and I'm like, oh, like they're dashed lines. Like, I don't think that's pavement. Well, it was pavement. It was just a bike path that was kind of a dashed line on the map. And so I had no, I had no idea that it was mostly pavement that day. I thought it was more like gravel trails and stuff. So I didn't really know like what to expect. So all I was doing was knowing like I had to run probably about 8 hours a day. I was stocking, my resupply bag with like half the amount of calories, assuming that the resupply point would be about halfway through the day. And so carry half my calories, put half in the bag, and just go for it. And accept what kind of comes at you. You just, in a race like this where you don't know what's coming, you kind of have to do that. You just kind of like, you're like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do today. Let's go, see the countryside. Um, that was interesting because it was all new to me. Do I like to know what's coming sometimes on a course? Sure, it helps me maybe run a little bit faster, knowing what I've got to, what I'm approaching for the day. But at the same time, like, it makes it kind of more interesting if I don't know what's coming, because everything's new to me and I can just, whatever's around the next corner, I can see new things. So that's kind of cool.
Sometimes it's better to not know what's coming as well, isn't it, in a race?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah,
That can
yeah,
demoralize you if you know something a bad section is coming up. Whereas if you haven't got a clue what the course is like, then you just sort of you go with it, don't you?
yep.
Sort of looking at nutrition then. So you were saying about obviously splitting your nutrition in half and restocking halfway. What have you sort of trained with and brought? Have you brought stuff with you to use, or have you used stuff that was on the course?
No, well, there's nothing on the course, so you're stuck with what you got. So you got to bring all your food for this race with you. I mean, obviously they feed you like dinner and breakfast, but like as far as race nutrition goes, you're on your own for that. I'm a GU athlete. I had a lot of like Roctane drink mix, so most of my calories that I was taking in were drink mix. So just getting them in liquid calories. I would supplement with waffles like when I wanted to during the day, because around lunchtime, I'm starting to get a little hungry. And so I'd stick a couple waffles in my mouth. But most of my calories throughout the race were just liquid calories, just kind of like a maltodextrin mix. So just tried to keep it, really simple, as simple as I possibly could, just so that wasn't fiddling around with a bunch of other like different things and stuff, and just do something that worked.
Yeah. So is that sort of the approach you take to multi days? Do you ever go for sort of real food over liquid calories, or is it something that you just sort of it worked for you and you stick with it?
I mean, typically in an ultra, like up to about 8 hours, I stick with, like, usually in the past, it's been gels and water just to keep it super simple. In this race, I decided to go with liquid calories so I didn't have to fiddle with the gels, because like the liquid calories I've been doing more and more, and it's working great. I have a really concentrated like maltodextrin powder as well, so I can get in one like 500 ml flask, I can get 1,000 calories in there, which is great because then I'm just kind of like using that for about 4 hours of time, and I don't have to like keep pulling out gels. But typically, like I try to keep it as simple as possible. Up to about 8 hours, I do liquid or gels. After that, I start to like put in some more solid food, and so longer ultras, I'll put in bars, some solid food, stuff like that. I've been doing some more like multi-day adventure racing the last couple of years now, and that for that, there's definitely solid food in there, just because of like your nutrition needs, but also like making sure that your stomach isn't like just like trying to eat itself because it's hungry. And so for those things, I'm doing a lot more solid food and real food for those, just because they're continuous for multi-days, and you need some real food for that kind of stuff. So.
Definitely. What's your view on the? I know you don't like to talk about trends, but there's a lot of stuff in the in the I say in the trail running press. There's a lot of hype about trying to get 100 grams plus into your system per hour. Are you still? Obviously, we used to talk about like calories per hour, didn't we? But now it's very much focused on how many grams of carbs an hour. What's your take on that? Is that something you've sort of always been aware of, or you've tried to push over the years, or is something you're trying to work on now? Or
Yeah, and that was something that when I was getting into ultras that was it was kind of holding me back for a little while. Um, a lot of the older ultra runners that I was looking up to at the time were kind of like coaching me through like how to do the nutrition side of things, and they're like, "No, you keep taking in more, keep taking in more." And so like once I kind of figured that out, I've usually tried to be between like it's really funny because I still talk in calories per hour, and you guys have totally switched to grams of carbs per hour. So now I got to like convert. But usually I'm trying to be between 300 and 400 calories an hour, so like 80 to 100 or so grams of carbs per hour. And so like I've always tried to be kind of in that area when I'm pushing pretty hard. I can be between those like 80 to 100 grams. Um, this race, I mean, I think I was a little lower than that because the intensity was a little bit lower. So when I'm running a little bit easier, I'm obviously like, at a lower intensity, I'm burning more fat than I am carbs. And so I can kind of reduce the number of carbs. And so I think I was during this. But at the same time, like it's like the more carbs you can get in and process, the better, like I think you're going to withstand the day's intensity and the run for the day. So yeah, I'm a big proponent of like increasing that and getting in a lot of carbs for the day though. So
absolutely. What was the food like in the evenings and breakfast time then on the race? Because yeah, I'm assuming that it wasn't anything that you're probably familiar with, or was it?
yeah, it was. I mean, it's kind of your normal stuff. Like for dinner, a couple nights I think we had a curry one night. We had stew. It's all vegetarian and vegan, so they don't do any meat. Which for me, like I'm totally fine with that. But what I did feel like as the week progressed was I was a little lacking on protein. So I wish that I'd had I actually forgot to bring like a protein shake from home when I packed. It's like I wish I had that for recovery every evening. So right after we'd get done, they'd have soup and chips for us, and so like I'd load up on that. But it was probably just a little low in like some of that protein content that I wish I would have had. Dinner was really good. Breakfast was great because it was like typical English. We had beans, so I had beans every morning, which isn't normally in my diet for breakfast. But I love beans, so that was fine. And then eggs and hash browns and all your kind of typical breakfast stuff. And so breakfast I loved. It was really really good. Dinner I loved. It was really good food. Just the one thing that I was probably lacking was that protein content. So I think it was on day 4 after getting done with that rough day, there was a pub right like next to the camp. Like, I'm gonna go grab a burger. so so I took Simon over and a couple of other guys, and we went and had burgers over there, which was great. So yeah.
Yeah, I forget that about the race organizers that's sort of their angle. The food is vegetarian and vegan. Yeah, not
Yeah.
I'd completely forgot about that actually. Yeah. So if that's something that you're not familiar with, I know I do well having an omnivorous diet. It's I've tried cutting out meat and stuff in the past, but for me, I just feel better with it
Yeah.
included.
They do a good job of like balancing everything, and I think you're getting enough calories in with the dinners that they provide. I shouldn't have forgotten my protein shake for recovery at the like right when I ended, and that's probably the one thing that I just needed throughout the week. As far as like protein content in the dinners, I think it was fine, and they definitely make sure that it's pretty well balanced. So I didn't have any issues with that. I just needed a little more protein when I finished. That was all. And that was on me, kind of. So.
Yeah. So you say about going for a burger with Simon. What was the sort of dynamics between you guys at the front? Because I know Simon, I know him. I've interviewed him a few times, and I've seen him at races and stuff. And he's genuinely funny guy. But he makes
Yeah.
me laugh a lot. How did you sort of? Was there a rivalry, or was it sort of a bit of banter between you, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, like not being in his head, I don't know exactly what he was thinking throughout the first couple of days, but I know like talking to his mates and stuff, like he's a very competitive dude. And I knew he wasn't going to give up, even if I got like a pretty good gap on him, which I appreciate. I love that. Um, and so like the first couple of days, like I think I got 10 minutes on him the first day, 8 minutes on him the second day, and I can't tell like if he's kind of like getting angry with himself or trying to be more competitive with me, but he's definitely in the mindset of like, okay, I'm going to take every shortcut I can. I'm going to let Max like, leave first in the morning. So I feel like we were probably playing a little bit of a head game the first couple of days. And then I got 30 minutes on him on that third day. And I think that kind of mellowed us both out a little bit. Like my tack was like, okay, I'm going to stick with Simon for the first half or 2/3 of the day, and then kind of like blast the like last third. And so I was kind of doing that, and it kind of worked out in my favor because I'd get a couple minutes on him each of those first 2 days, and so I was kind of building a lead. 20-minute lead though after 2 days is like not enough. And so that third day, like upping that to 30 minutes, really helped. Just kind of like, I think it kind of mellowed us all out. We're still competing, and he's competing real hard and not giving up at all. But I think it kind of like relaxed the tension between us, I feel like. And so, like, Thursday, on the fourth day, we went out, had a burger, and um, it probably just eased that competitive tension a little bit more is what I kind of felt like. So, but Sue, like I love Simon. He's awesome dude. And especially after a couple of days, we went out, we ran together for the first half on days 5 and 6. And it was just really fun to run with him. He's pretty quiet out there, as am I, when we're running. But it was a super friendly relationship, and he's a cool guy. He just texted me yesterday and said, "Hey, mate, how are the legs? How's things feeling?" And so I wrote him back and said, "Oh, great, getting back, running or riding a little bit, and how are you?" So it's just super friendly. So, and I love that about trail runners. It's like we're going to compete hard, and you can kind of say we're enemies during a race, but at the end of the race, as soon as we cross that finish line, we're friends. So
Yeah, that's the good thing about trail running, isn't it? Yeah. So I messaged Simon, and I said that I was interviewing you, and I said, "Have you got any questions?" But he didn't send me any questions. So
okay.
I suggested the question of why don't you stay in America and race, which he thought was hilarious, but he still didn't give me a question to give to you. So
Okay, all right, fair
maybe
enough.
maybe he's still
Wow.
smart there.
I'm
But
trying to get him to come over here now, so
yeah,
he's got to come over here. I offered up my house, so he can come over here and race. I think he's genuinely interested in coming over and doing some races over here. So hopefully he'll take me up on that and come over here and race a couple times.
yeah. What sort of races would you recommend for him over there then?
Oh, I mean, I don't know. I haven't really thought too much about it. It kind of depends on the time frame that he gets to come over here. I'd have to just figure out what races, like what kind of worked with his schedule and stuff. But we've definitely got some awesome races just in the Pacific Northwest here. Some are competitive, some are not. But some of the bigger races over here that would be good for him. Trying to like being sensitive to like he's coming from sea level, as am I, kind of for the most part. So like those high altitude races in Colorado are probably just going to be like really rough for him. And so trying to pick a lower elevation race that's still got some competitive guys in it, I think would be really fun for him. So we've got one in Southern Oregon here in July called the Siskiyou Outback Run that is one of my favorite races that I kind of started with. It was my first 50K. Beautiful race, like kind of gives you a really good feel of kind of the mountains here and some really nice volcanic mountain views and stuff like that. So that one's a really nice one, but there's a ton of them around. So
Yeah, plenty to choose from. Sort of, obviously, you've got a bit of a taste for UK races, and my listeners will sort of be sighing now because this is something I always bring up in pretty much every podcast I do. But have you any thoughts on wanting to come over and do the spine race?
ooh, I don't know, man. That spine race sounds that sounds rough. Like that's the thing about me is like you were talking about earlier, like the ability for me to recover is like my superpower. So like a night of sleep and a meal does wonders for me. So like I could have like woken up on day 7 of this and I was like, oh, I don't really want to run another 40 miles, but I think I probably could. But like, so the spine race, like those continuous races, I don't, man, that's tough. Like it'd be really hard to do. But Cape Wrath, though, like that
Mhm.
is very much on my radar, and I kind of would like to come over for Cape Wrath now at this point. So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. They're I'm glad that more, obviously, like with UK races, and I'm really glad that US runners are coming over and sort of experiencing the races that we have over here because they are very, specific to sort of our environment and our terrain and everything. And I think it's great that more come over. And I was saying this before that so I work on the media team for the spine race, and while I was there at the race, not this last year, the year before, um Courtney Dauwalter started following the race, and she was like
cool.
putting messages on and stuff, and everyone was like, "Does that mean that Courtney's going to come and do the spine race?" And at the time, and this is something that I really want to happen is that obviously, um, I forgot his name now. Random Forest runner John Kelly. John Kelly's
Oh yeah,
obviously like, loves the spine race and
yep.
comes over for it. But do you think there's anybody in the US that would sort of be a good contender for coming over and doing that kind of race? Now that the sort of terrain that we have over here, is there anyone that you think that would do well at that?
I mean, for sure. Like John Kelly would be one that would come to mind first. Like kind of the guys who have done Barkley and done well there are kind of the ones that pop into my mind, like Jared Campbell and John Kelly and those types of guys who just can like gut out these like horrendous conditions. But there's obviously there's a lot of other ones as well. I mean, guys who do well at Hard Rock and races like that, where there's just these like tough conditions and you're kind of grinding more than like running for speed, I think kind of uh, work well with things like the spine race and stuff. And there's a whole host of runners that I'm not even thinking of who maybe haven't broken through that like because they haven't done well at like Hard Rock, Western States, like a faster 100 miler that like are really tough runners who just grind things, and they could do really well at a race like the spine race. So
Yeah, yeah, it takes a certain sort of mentality, doesn't it, to do those.
yeah,
It's
yeah, I
not.
feel like it does. Like Gabe, like Joyce, who was there at the race, I think he would do really well. He seems kind of like a grinder, and he kind of gets into a groove of things. Good runner as well, but like can I can tell just from this race that he can just grind and just kind of get through things, and he would do pretty well at the spine race, I think too. So, but for me, I never count anything out. I'm actually thinking like tour is now on my radar, just because of how many people have kind of started talking about that and doing that. And the 200 milers over here, I've never considered because like I have a hard time getting through a 100 miler, and I haven't had a lot of success at like 100 miles. But for whatever reason, like tour kind of like speaks to me a little bit, and that idea of multi days, like a lot of miles, continuous, but you do get a chance to kind of sleep during those. And the expedition adventure races that I've been doing recently have kind of got me thinking like, hey, maybe I could give that a shot, see if I could continue with the running side of things as opposed to the running, biking, paddling, and kind of going for multiple days at a time. So
something to set your sights on. What have you got sort of planned for is this your sort of season over now, your racing season? Have you got plans for anything else towards the end of the year, or are you just sort of calming things down now?
No, everybody at the race was kind of like, yeah, this is the end of my year. And I'm like, oh, I have I have a race in 2 weeks. I have the adventure racing national championships are in 2 weeks here, so I'm planning on doing that. They're over in West Virginia. It's like a 30-hour race, so not super long for an adventure race, but it'll be pretty hot and heavy with competition. And then maybe doing 100 miler or a 4 day stage race, one of those formats over in Australia in November. So, and I've got another little race in October that's kind of like a fun, like wander around in the woods for 12 to 24 hours, that sort of thing. So, yeah, just some fun stuff. I'm always putting races in there. They keep me motivated. I like racing. I like the competition side of things, and so always got one on the radar.
Yeah, it's good. For people that struggle with motivation for training, there's nothing more motivating than knowing that you've got a race coming up that
Yeah,
you've got to train for.
yeah, for sure, for sure.
Brilliant. Well, I appreciate you coming on, Max, and talking to my listeners and viewers, and getting to know a bit more about you. Obviously, I'd sort of you've been on my radar for a few years, like listening. So I'm a big listener to a lot of the US podcasts about trail running and stuff. So your name pops up quite a bit. So
Cool.
I really appreciate you coming on and giving your sort of background and your superhero origin story, and letting people know that people from the US can come over here and do races. It is allowed. We do let you come.
And I recommend it too. I mean, you guys have amazing races. They're so much fun. Very different environments than what we've got over here with some bogs that you can get trapped in if you don't know what you're doing, which is really fun. So when you end up to your waist in a bog and you're like, what is this?
Yeah, what is it? Yeah. That is something very specific to Britain. Yeah, bogs.
That it is.
So,
Yep.
there's an advert for you. So come and see the bogs.
Yep.
So thanks for coming on, mate. I appreciate you giving up your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And hopefully, I'll see you one day at a race in person, maybe.
Yeah.
Mm.
I'll be back for sure. So, well, thanks for having me on too. Appreciate it. It's really fun.
No problem. Thanks, mate. Cheers for coming on. Thanks for listening,
Thanks.
everyone. Cheers. Bye, 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 bye.